We're in John chapter 11. You've got a copy of the scriptures, John chapter 11. And today I thought we'd start out by looking at the Mona Lisa. So Mona Lisa, most famous painting ever. If you've been to France, you've gone to the Louvre probably and seen her image there. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. People say it is so lifelike. That's what makes it so striking when you look at her. You feel like she's looking right at you. But what if she did? You didn't see that coming, did you? Isn't it crazy what AI can do? It can animate things. And when I think about this, it's almost like a resurrection, taking something that looks like it's dead and still making it look alive. And today we're talking about Lazarus and his resurrection. And what's fascinating me about resurrection in the Bible is that you see it happen, and we just kind of like go right past it. We're like, yeah, obviously he was resurrected. Like, it was kind of like, it's just kind of thing that Jesus did. But like, isn't resurrection just absolutely like insane when you really think about it? I don't know where we got super comfortable with this idea of people coming back from the dead. Do you know anybody that was just like dead and then they came back to life? I don't know anybody like that. And so this story of the resurrection of Lazarus should be shocking, right? Because in its very nature, it defies every person's known history and known lived experience. And so today, I want to get back to just the shocking nature of the sign of the resurrection of Lazarus and what it really means for you and me. Because I think Jesus wants to say something through this story. So what we're going to do, it's a long passage. We're going to walk through it sequentially. We're going to take chunks of it and kind of talk through it. And at the end, we're going to come to the place where I think Jesus wants us to get to, where he like challenges us with his statement of who he is. So John chapter 11, verse 1, find our story right here. It says this: Now a man was sick, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother, Lazarus, who was sick. So the sister sent a message to him: Lord, the one you love is sick. And when Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. And then after that, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. Now, our story picks up here. Lazarus is sick. Lazarus is one of Jesus' best friends. The Bible doesn't tell us many people that Jesus loved. Like he was like, man, I love this guy. So they were really close friends. And Jesus and the entire family were pretty close. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were a really tight-knit community and were really tight with Jesus. And you guys know a lot about Mary and Martha because they pop up throughout the different accounts in the scriptures. You find the story, kind of probably everybody in this room probably knows, of Mary and Martha kind of having this dialogue with Jesus. Jesus had come over to eat dinner. They have a dinner party. And Martha is like working like a gangster in the kitchen. Like she's just like busting it. She's working really hard, preparing food, not just for Jesus, but like all of his followers, everybody else. And she looks over and sees Mary sitting by Jesus, just like eating it up. She's like, yes, this is awesome. And you know the story. Martha goes, you need to get in here and help me. And we've all been there, right? Where we've had like people over and some are just goofing around and like hanging out with the guests and we're like busting in the kitchen. That's what Martha was feeling. And so you've heard the story go, hey, listen, you need to be a Mary, not a Martha. Like you need to sometimes put your stuff down and just stay at Jesus' feet and hear from him. So we know that story about them. We also know that Mary at one point brings a jar of very expensive perfume and breaks it at Jesus' feet and washes his feet with her hair and her tears. So there's this history that they have with Jesus. So with all of that, when Lazarus is sick, they send for Jesus because we don't know what he's sick with, but it's bad. It's bad enough that they're like, we're calling 911, except they didn't have 911. So they're like, we're calling Jesus. And every time you call 911, what do you want? You want them to show up, right? Right away. Like you're like, can you come immediately? Which is weird because what Jesus says is different. Look with me in verse 6. It says this. He says, so when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. And then he said, let's go to Judea again. See, Jesus hears about Lazarus being sick, and they're far away. They're not in Judea. In fact, I got a map here. You can see what the map looks like. This is a new map for us. It kind of shows you like what elevation looks like. Israel is like almost vertical, like it's just straight up and down, a lot of it. Jesus is up in Galilee near Nazareth. Lazarus lives down here in Bethany, here at the bottom by Jerusalem. They're actually a pretty close walk from Jerusalem. In fact, during the Holy Week, Jesus stays in Bethany and goes back and forth because it's about the same distances from here where I'm standing to Wade's. Everybody knows where Wade's is, right? It's about that far away from the temple. And so Jesus stays in Bethany and goes into Jerusalem in and out during Holy Week. And so he's coming to Bethany because he likes staying with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. And he shows up here over and over again when he goes into Jerusalem. But here, he has to walk this entire distance uphill. It's almost like a 4,000 foot elevation gain to get to Bethany, and it takes him a long time. You would think Jesus would be like, all right, we got to go. We got a long walk. Let's go right away. But what does he do? The Bible tells us in verse 6 that he stays 2 more days because he loves them. That doesn't seem very loving, does it? You see, I think when people love me, they'll do anything for me. They'll move quickly. They'll put me as a priority. But like Jesus, because he loves them, decides to stay 2 days before he even leaves. God makes Lazarus wait. Show of hands. Who likes to wait in the room? You're lying. Nope, nobody likes to wait. We all hate waiting. That's why we even go to like Chick-fil-A, right? Because the food is good and it's what? Quick. Pow. It's there. Like we like to get things in an instant. We don't like to wait at all. We can't wait for Christmas. I know some of you have your Christmas lists already like written up. Like you cannot wait. You can't wait. There's some people who are getting married in the next couple of weeks. Alexis is getting married. One of our student leaders, she's getting married in a week. I know she can't wait. Every time I see her and Nathan, I'm like, how many more days? Because I know they know the day down to the hour, right? Because we hate to wait. So why does God make Lazarus wait? Why does he make Mary and Martha wait? I believe it's because he loves them. And he has a purpose for their life. And this is what Jesus says in John 11:4, right here in this passage. He says, when he heard about this, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so the Son of God may be glorified through it. Jesus has a plan and a purpose in the waiting. And even though death is going to happen, notice he doesn't say there's not going to be any death. He says it's not going to end in death. And through Lazarus' death, God is going to proclaim his glory, but they're going to have to wait until he does. And friend, if you've got something you're waiting on, you may be waiting for a kid to come home. You may be waiting on finding a time where your depression or your anxiety isn't crippling you. You might be going through a season where you're waiting on God to provide for you some healing or some resources that you need. You may be in a moment where you're just waiting on what God has next for you. You're waiting for that next job or your next situation. And you're just like, God, why are you making me wait? Perhaps it's because God loves you and wants to glorify himself through you. That may be the reason why. It was the reason for Lazarus. See, God looks at time different than we do. A lot of us think about time, and we think about time just as a unit of waiting. In the Bible, the idea of time is actually captured in 2 different words, not just one. But there are 2 words for time in Greek. The first one is the word chronos. And this is the kind of time we think about. Like how much longer does it take for us to get through the current moment we're in? It's the idea of a clock and a unit of time sequentially through our history. This is what we think of when we're like, think about, am I going to be late for the meeting? Am I going to be late for church? Am I going to be late? We always want to make sure that we're not late. But the Bible has a different word for time, the word kairos. The word kairos is not so much about the time through life. That word kairos means God's timing. It's the idea you have when you have somebody playing baseball and the pitcher throws the pitch and the batter times it up and squares that ball and drives it out of the infield. Just like my boy Ronald Acuna right here. That's timing. Or it's the idea of a surfer. You know, surfing's all about timing. It doesn't matter how long you're out in the waves. And yes, that is Adam Sandler. That is not me. And if you've ever been surfing, you know that you have to wait for the right wave and you have to know the right moment to get up on that board and surf. Otherwise, what happens? You're right back into the water with the sharks. That's what happens. It's about timing. Timing is applied to music. I don't know how many of you play an instrument. Anybody play an instrument in the room? Just kind of curious. Okay, a lot of you. It's like, actually, that's less than I thought. So music lessons for all of you. Music is all about timing. When you are listening to music, you have to know the right moment to play a chord or to sing a note. If you don't, what happens? Everybody notices. Music is about timing. It's about kairos. Relationships, they're about timing. Got a picture here of a young man asking a girl out on a date. We know that timing matters. Like, if you ask too early, you're a creep. If you ask too late, and they're with somebody else. You have to get the right timing. God has perfect timing. He's never late, even though you may think that he is. And that's what you find Jesus doing when he shows up in Bethany. Verse 17, it says this. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. And as soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. And then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet, even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again at the resurrection at the last day. Now, I wanted us to look at this because we find some really important pieces of information here about Mary and Martha and the way that they saw death and what Jesus was walking into. When Jesus shows up, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. 4 days. The reason this is significant is because Jews in Jesus' time believed that when people died, their spirit would like hover around the body for a period of days, usually 2 to 3 days. And so there are other stories of resurrection. You find this in the Old Testament where Elijah and Elisha both raised a young boy from the dead. You see even Jesus raising a widow's son back from the dead. But all of those were like within that 3-day window. Lazarus is on the other side. So he's like not just only dead, he's like dead. Like his spirit has like left. And so people are like, man, there's no coming back from this for Lazarus. And Martha sees Jesus and she says, Jesus, I know that he's dead. He's been dead for 4 days. But like, I know that even if you wanted to bring him back, God listens to you differently than everybody else. And Jesus says, do you believe that that I can raise him? And she says, I believe in the resurrection at the end of time. I believe that the resurrection of the dead happens, he'll be brought back, which is something that would mark her as a Pharisee because the Pharisees believed that resurrection did occur, but at the end of time. Sadducees, the other like party of believers, of Jewish believers during this time, and what I mean by Jewish believers, I mean like not like Christian believers, but those who followed the law and were like religious leaders in the time. Those folks believed in no resurrection at all. So she's claiming that there's a resurrection, but she's not thinking that he's going to be raised right here. So Jesus then responds to her and says this. This is a significant thing that he says to her. Verse 25, Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she's told him. I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. Now, Jesus says something that's absolutely astounding. He hears that she believes in the resurrection, and he says, guess what? I am the resurrection. You know, you can't say that Jesus is just a good teacher and not say that he's God, because he says stuff like this. Jesus is like, I am the life and the resurrection. And when he does that, he's using God's divine name. When he says, I am, he's using God's covenant name, Yahweh. And then he's saying, I'm the one who owns life and resurrection. And he goes on to say, anybody who believes in me, even if they die, will be brought back. If you believe in me and then hold fast to that, you're never going to die. This is a powerful statement. It's one of the 7 I am statements that we've been talking about. I've had this graphic I've been putting up every week for the last couple of weeks because we've been touching on the different I am statements that John uses. There are 7 of them. If you're new, you haven't heard this before, this is new information for you. John organizes the Gospel of John on 7 signs and 7 I am statements. And you can see them right here. And a couple of them overlap, like the bread of life and the feeding of the 5,000 and the raising of Lazarus and our statement, the resurrection of life. These overlap in the same passage. And it's important for us to realize that Jesus is using these to kind of teach us about himself. But there's something different about this one than every other one. You know what the thing that's interesting about this one? All the others are actually delivered in a sermon or in a speech, and they're delivered to people, to a group of people, not just one person, but like an entire gathering. So Jesus is usually telling this to a group of people who both believe in him and don't believe in him. But this one is delivered to an individual, a single person, Martha. It's the only one where Jesus says this to an individual, a single person. He tells Martha, I am the resurrection and life. And he follows it up with a question, which he doesn't do anywhere else. Puts her right on the spot. And he says, do you believe this? See, Jesus doesn't like let her off the hook. He wants her to answer the question. Who do you think that I am? And Martha gets a bad rap a lot. You know, a lot of times we do talk about how she's the person you shouldn't follow because she's too busy for Jesus. But she nails this test. She does. She delivers the clearest declaration of the person and work of Jesus Christ that you'll find up to this point. Verse 27, she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world. She goes 3 for 3. She says, yes, I believe. She says, yes, you are the Messiah. You're the one I've been waiting for. You're the deliverer of Israel. And you're not just a good king, the son of David. You are actually the Son of God. And she moves from being somebody who is near Jesus to being someone who actually believes in Jesus. There's a change that happens. You see, you can be near Jesus. You can serve Jesus. You can do things for Jesus. You can have Jesus in your home. But it's a completely different thing to believe that Jesus is who he said he was. And here she says, I believe. And then Jesus goes from there and meets with Mary. Look with me in verse 32. Verse 32 says this, as soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And when Jesus saw her crying and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved them. But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes kept this man from dying? Jesus shows up, and there are some who are wondering, like, why couldn't you have saved this guy, Jesus? And sometimes when we think about Jesus, we think like, why couldn't you have intervened? And do you even care? I don't know if you ever felt that way, if you've wondered if God cares or sees, or if he's simply just like, hey, listen, it's not that big of a deal. Even when it's a big deal to you, that God just kind of like talks down to you. Have you ever wondered that? Because you've had probably some people, like when you're going through a really hard time, maybe you're like lost somebody and they're trying to comfort you, but they say the worst, most tone-deaf things possible. Like, hey, listen, in 100 years, this isn't going to matter. And you're like, I want to throw something at you. Sometimes you can be going through a really tough time and you can feel like Jesus feels that way. But that's not how he feels. Jesus shows how he feels about pain and suffering in this passage more than any other part of the Bible. So pay attention. Verse 33 says, when Jesus saw her crying, And the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. The Bible tells us that he was moved in his spirit and troubled. Now, the phrase that we see this in English doesn't really capture how Jesus responds. Because what does it mean to be moved in your spirit? Does it mean just like, oh, I feel like, well, whatever. Or I'm troubled. Like that just feels like he was like moody, right? But the Greek uses a word called embrinomai. And that word is used other places in ancient history. And it means a loud groaning. They would use this sometimes to indicate the way that horses snort when they're like really frustrated or about to go into battle. So basically, Jesus makes a noise that you make when you're really frustrated. And you know what I'm talking about. You may have used that noise with your kids this morning getting to church. Maybe you did it in traffic, but there is a noise when you're like really upset, when you have no words to use. You just kind of make a noise, and it's kind of like all of your like emotion just like coming out without words. Have you ever done that? I can't be the only one. Y'all, you know the noise. It's something like, ah, like you kind of go Hulk a little bit, right? Jesus makes that noise. He's so upset. And then the Bible tells us, verse 35, that he wept. Now, listen, I watched the movie the other night. Like I started getting a little like teary. It's like I was like sweating in my eyes. I wasn't really crying. That's not what Jesus was doing. I'm guessing Jesus did the ugly cry because he's deeply moved. That's how Jesus sees pain, your pain, Lazarus's pain. He doesn't just stay and go, I can fix this. He enters into it. That's why he's better than any other religion, God you can follow, because Jesus walks with us when it hurts. Verse 38 says, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, there's already a stench there because he's been dead for 4 days. I love how honest the Bible is here. Like Jesus is like, open up the stone. Martha's like, okay, I can believe that you can do anything, but Jesus, he stinks in there. Like he's been dead for a while. In the King James, which I read when I was a kid, I used mostly when I was younger, Bible actually uses a really funny phrase. I just kind of giggle when I read it. It literally goes, he stinketh, Lord, which I think is just like awesome, right? So they're worried that he just is like already starting to rot. And Jesus doesn't stop there. What does Jesus do? He looks at her and he says, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because the crowd is standing here, I said this so that they may believe that you sent me. And then after this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to him, unwrap him and let him go. You know, when it's darkest, God does his greatest work, and he brings Lazarus out of the grave. It's a powerful, powerful moment. I'm sure everybody was like completely in awe. But could you imagine what it would have been like to be Lazarus going forward? You know, what were his conversations like? We were like, hey, what's the most interesting thing you've ever done? He's like, well, I died one time. And then I woke up and I heard this voice telling me to get up and walk out. And I did. I was back. Like, it was incredible. You should meet Jesus, right? Can you imagine what it would have been like if somebody tried to bully him or try to kill him, which we know happens in the very next chapter? The religious leaders are so scared of Jesus because of this miracle that they decide to kill Jesus at this point and Lazarus. But Lazarus is probably like, yeah, do your worst. Like, he already brought me back once. He can do it again, right? I'm not afraid of you. But it's fascinating. This story and the parallels that you find in it are almost exactly like Jesus is. Like, they were both in a tomb. They both had a stone. The stone had to be rolled away. It had been a long time since the death when there was a resurrection. Jesus had his hands and his feet bound like this too. And I'm wondering if When Jesus dies, Lazarus is like, listen, I know all you guys are freaking out, but guess what he can do? He said he's the resurrection and the life. Let's just take him at his word. When you have been resurrected, it changes the way you see the world. It does. And here's what Jesus says. He says, if you believe in me, you also get it. You get it. It's like Oprah. You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. Jesus is like, you all get resurrection if you believe in me. So do you believe it? Do you believe him? It's the most important thing you can know about life, is the one who says he is the resurrection and the life. Do you know him? Do you believe it? Or has it become just another thing? Or is it the main thing? Listen, I don't know what your story is. I don't know where you've come from. I don't know what kind of trauma or experience you've had in church or with religious people, or if you grew up in church at all, or if you're like, man, I've been doing so many things that are so shameful. Like, man, I'm surprised God hasn't hit me with a lightning bolt showing up here. Just know this. Jesus looks at you and says, I'm the resurrection of life. I can raise things back to life that were dead. I'm inviting you to believe. Believe. And I think some of you need a resurrection. Some of you need to put your hope in the resurrection. You're missing a loved one, and your hope to see them again is what Jesus said about himself. Some of you have brokenness in your life, and the hope that you need is the fact that Jesus says, I have life for you, and I resurrect dead things. And that life isn't just in the afterlife. It starts right now. And it comes by believing that he is who he said that he is. And if you walked out of here without doing business with God, it would be the greatest shame in the world. So I want to just take a time to reflect and think. And I want to speak to those who are believers in the room. Listen, you've been raised to life if you trusted Jesus. Don't you think you should live that out in real time? Why would you go back to death? Why would you not tell people about it? When we talk about 5,000 gospel conversations, this should be the easiest thing for us to hit every year. Why? Because we have a story to tell. Jesus changed us and gave us life again. And you need to tell people. So I'm going to just put the challenge on you. If you're a Christian, we should blow past 5,000 gospel conversations this week if we really just all took it seriously. I mean, there's over 1,000 people in this room. Tell somebody about what Jesus did for you. Why? Because you were dead, but now you're alive. That's what Jesus says happens at salvation. And here's the deal. If you've never trusted Jesus Christ, you've been on the fence, you've been coming, you've been hearing about Jesus from me over the last weeks and months. I know there's a lot of you like that. God doesn't want you to have a secondhand experience with Jesus. And he's telling you, just like he told Martha, I'm the resurrection of life. Do you believe it? And if you have in the heart of hearts, deep within your heart, just a stirring, just this hunger, you feel like you're thirsty for something, that's God telling you to trust him, to give up, to come home, to choose resurrection. And I want to offer that to you. The way you do that is simply by telling Jesus that you're in. So I want to take a moment. Everybody just kind of close your eyes right where you are. Just the reason we're doing that is not because we want to be weird. It's just to give you a time to just not be distracted by the people around you or by anything else going on, and just to give you some privacy where you are. But right where you are, if you've already proclaimed Jesus and you've chosen resurrection, I want to challenge you to not act like you're still in the tomb. What a shame if Lazarus is cool. Well, actually, it was pretty comfortable in there. I'm going back in. but that you would live the life that God gave you. That you'd be bold. Because Jesus is for you. So whatever it means that God's telling you right now how to live that out, you need to step into it. I want to speak real quick to anybody who doesn't know if they're a Christian. We baptized a young man in the first service who had been coming to church here for a while, and he realized, I haven't really trusted Jesus. I can give the answers, but I haven't given my heart to him. And he gave his life to Jesus with Todd, our student minister, and got baptized in our service. Because he was like, man, I've crossed from death to life. And he was already coming here. It was in a group. But he realized his life was not Jesus's. And if that's you, I want you to trust Christ. I'll make it really simple. What that means is saying, God, you got full control of my life. I believe you are the resurrection of life. I believe that you are the Messiah. I believe that you are God. And I'm putting my trust in you, not in me. I'm going to give you my past. I'm going to give you my present. I'm going to give you my future. And for you who's thinking that right now, I just want you to pray this with me. Jesus, I trust you. I give you my life, all of it. Why? Because I don't have hope, and I need it. I feel you calling me, and I'm in. All in. I want to follow you every day of my life. I believe that you are the resurrection of life, so have my life. Guys, just stay in the moment. Keep your eyes closed. If there's anybody who chose that today, you need to tell somebody. You can tell a friend, you can tell a parent, you can tell somebody you know that you trust, but you could tell me too, and I'd love to know because I want to help you. So if you did that, just raise your hand. If you trusted Christ today, made a decision to follow Jesus, I just want to know if anybody made that decision today. Okay. I see you. God sees you. If that's your choice, choose to follow him with all that you have because it's worth it. So as we transition to a time of reflection and response, I just want to pray a blessing over you. Jesus loves you. We love you. Go with confidence that God is for you because he is enough. Jesus, I pray that you guard our hearts and that we would live resurrected lives. And from this place, you would proclaim your glory until you come back. It's in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you for connecting with us today. Please take a minute to share this message with a friend and click subscribe to be notified when we share new uplifting content that will encourage you and help you grow deeper in your faith. Click the link on the screen to get connected with us and support how God is using this ministry to set the world alight for Jesus Christ. We're praying for you. We'll see you next time.